Hello again and welcome to JIPA Distance Learning. Our lesson for today is all about measure area. If you have noticed, I have here a smiley face and a sad face. We are going to use these faces later for our self-assessment. If you think that your answer is correct, then you're going to make a happy face. If you think that your answer is wrong, then you're going to make a sad face. Now let's move. For our big question for today, how is the operation of addition related to finding area? Now, for our vocabulary words, area. When you say area is the number of square units needed to cover a figure without overlapping. Again, when you say area, it is the number of square units needed to cover a figure without overlapping. Now let's have our review. All you have to do is to count the unit squares to find the area of the figure. So what do you think is the area here? We are going to count the unit squares. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So we have 24 square units. So our area or the area of this figure are 24 square units. Now let's move here. You know already that area is the number of square units needed to cover a figure without overlapping. But how about we have this figure? If you have noticed, we have here half square units. This and this. So sometimes you need to count the number of half square units covered by the figure. Then how are we going to do that? So remember, if you can see these figures, these are all half square units. Now, each of these figures is a 1/2 square units. Now look at these figures. 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, and this is 1/2. Then how are we going to count this? Now, remember, shapes can be made up of whole squares and half squares. Again, shapes can be made up of whole square and half squares. Now, about counting of half squares, you're going to remember that if you can see 2 halves or 2 half squares, it is equivalent of 1 square unit. Now, let's go back to the figure. So, how are we going to count the whole squares and the half squares? So, you're going to count first the whole squares. So, here, we are going to count the whole squares again. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We are going to put it here, 8. Now, we are going to count the half squares. Remember, 2 halves or 2 1/2 is equivalent to 1. So here is 1/2, here is 1/2. So we are going to add both of them, so it is equivalent to 1. So we have now 8 whole squares and 1/2 square. So we are going to add the whole squares and half square. So the area of this figure is 9 square units. You know already that area is the number of square units needed to cover a figure without overlapping. So we are going to find the figure or the area of this figure. So remember, the figure has no gaps or overlaps. So we are going to count the square units. But shapes can be made or can be made up of whole squares and half squares. So we are going to put here whole numbers and half squares. Now, we are going to count the whole numbers first, or the whole squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we have 20 square or whole square units. So we are going to put it here in the whole numbers. Now next, we are going to find the half squares. So remember, each of these is a 1/2 square units. So I'm going to put here 1/2. There. And then here on the other side, 1/2. And 2/2 or 2/1/2 is equivalent to 1. So remember, again, 2/1/2 or 2/2 is equivalent to 1. So here, there's another 1/2 and 1/2. So this is equivalent to 1. And then here also, 1/2. And then here, 1/2. So again, this 2/2 is equivalent to 1. I'm going to put it here. So we are going to count how many 1 are there. So 1, 2, 3. So we're going to put it here. And after that, we are going to add the whole numbers in the half squares. So 20 plus 3, so 23. So we're going to put it here. So the area is 23 square units. Now let's move to our practice. Now we are going to get the area of this figure. Remember, you're going to get the whole squares first. So we are going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we have 15 whole squares. Now let's move to half squares. We have only 1 here. So this is equivalent to 1/2. So our area, or the area of this figure, is 15 and 1/2 square units. Now let's move to another figure. Here, again, we will start to whole squares. So we are going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So we have 14 whole squares. So there are 2 half squares there. So 1 and 2. So remember, if there are 2 halves or 2 half squares, it is equivalent to 1. So we are going to put here 1. Now you're going to add whole squares and half squares. So 14 plus 1, this is equivalent to 15. So the area of this figure, 15 square units. Now let's move to our quick review. All you have to do is to find the area of each figure. I will give you 10 seconds to answer, and then after that, we are going to assess your answer. Now let's move here. So what do you think is the area of this figure? Again, I will give you 10 seconds to answer. Are you ready? Now let's start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. The answer here is 12 square units. Now, I will give you a smiley face because I think you got the correct answer. So again, the area of this figure, 12 square units. Now let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we count the whole squares. Now let's move to the half squares. Now here 1 and 2. Remember, 2 halves or 2/1/2 is equivalent to 1. Now let's move again here. 1 and 2. 2 halves, it is equivalent to 1. 1 and 2. 2 halves is equivalent to 1. 1 and 2. 2 halves again is equivalent to 1. So we are going to add the whole squares and the half squares. So 8 plus 4, the total is 12. So this figure has the area of 12 square units. Now let's move to the second figure. What do you think is the area of this figure? Again, I will give you 10 seconds to answer. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. The answer here is, what do you think is the answer? Now you're going to assess your answer. If you think that your answer is correct, then make a happy face there. If you think that your answer is wrong, then you can make a sad face. Again, I will give you a happy face because I think you got it correctly. Now, the answer there is 12 square units. You're going to count the whole squares. Now that ends our lesson for today. I think you're ready now to answer the online quiz posted in the Google Classroom. Thank you and have a good day.